Assalamu alaikum and a good day to you all. This is your host Abdul Qadir with the 29th episode in the Science and History series, The Story of Captured Sunlight. Every morning, sunlight arrives on Earth. It fills our homes, lights our streets, warms our skin, and helps bring the world around us to life. It is so familiar that we rarely stop to think about it. We notice storms because they are dramatic. We notice floods, earthquakes, and fires because they demand our attention. But sunlight arrives quietly, day after day, year after year. Without it, our world would be unrecognizable. Plants would wither and die. Animals would struggle to survive. The food we eat would disappear. Life on Earth depends on sunlight in ways that are easy to overlook because it is always there. Yet, this ordinary part of everyday life is one of the most extraordinary things in our universe. So, in this episode, we'll explore these questions. Where does sunlight come from? And why is it so important to life on Earth? Human beings have always understood that sun is important. Long before science could explain it, people knew that their lives depended on the sun. Their crops depended on it. Their calendars followed it. Warmth and light came from it. Many ancient civilizations revered the sun, and some even worshipped it. They understood its importance. What they did not understand was its secret. How could the sun shine day after day, year after year for billions of years without running out of energy? The answer lies deep inside the sun itself. At its core, temperatures reach millions of degrees. Under these extreme conditions, hydrogen atoms are forced together. They combine to form helium atoms in a process known as nuclear fusion. During this process, a tiny amount of matter is transformed into energy. Now, more than a century ago, Albert Einstein revealed the relationship between matter and energy through one of the most famous equations in science, E equals mc squared, where E is energy, m is mass, and c is the speed of light. Now, this equation tells us that even a very small amount of matter can be converted into an enormous amount of energy. This is the secret of the sun. Every second, deep within its core, a small amount of matter is transformed into a vast amount of energy. This energy slowly works its way outward and eventually leaves the sun as light as heat. The sunlight that reaches Earth and makes life possible begins its journey in this remarkable process deep inside the sun. The sun is enormous. Its diameter is more than 100 times that of Earth. More than a million Earths could fit inside it. Yet, despite its size, it's also incredibly far away. Light travels at the speed of nearly 300,000 kilometers per second, or about over 180,000 miles per second, the fastest speed known in nature. Even at that incredible speed, sunlight takes over 8 minutes to reach our planet. Why? Because on average, the sun is about 150 million kilometers from Earth. Every ray of sunshine that reaches Earth has crossed the vast expanse of space. Earth receives only a tiny fraction of the energy emitted by the sun. Yet this tiny fraction is enough to power oceans, weather systems, forests, grasslands, and every living ecosystem on our planet. The next step in the story happens here on Earth because some living things have learned how to capture that energy. Plants perform one of the most remarkable feats in nature. Using sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide from the air, they produce the substances they need to grow. This process is called photosynthesis. For billions of years, plants and their microscopic relatives have been capturing energy from sunlight and storing it in chemical form. In a sense, plants learned how to harvest light. Leaves may appear ordinary, but they are among the most important solar collectors on Earth. Every tree in a forest, every blade of grass in a field, every crop growing on a farm is capturing sunlight and converting it into stored energy. Without photosynthesis, the world as we know it would not exist. Plants are the great bridge between sunlight and life. Now, once plants have captured sunlight, the energy begins to move. A rabbit eats grass, a fox eats the rabbit, a human eats plants and animals, or both. At each step, energy is transferred from one living thing to another. When we look at a loaf of bread, a bowl of rice, an apple, or any piece of fruit, we usually think of food. But from another perspective, we are looking at captured sunlight. The energy stored within food originally came from the sun. In a very real sense, we are all living on captured sunlight. There are a few remarkable exceptions. Deep beneath the ocean, some microorganisms obtain energy from chemicals released by hydrothermal vents rather than sunlight. But such ecosystems are rare. All other life on Earth ultimately depends on energy from the sun. Not all captured sunlight is eaten immediately. Sometimes it is stored. Millions of years ago, ancient plants absorbed sunlight just as plants do today. Some of these plants, when died, became buried beneath layers of sediment. Over immense spans of time, heat and pressure transformed their remains into coal, oil, and natural gas. These fuels contain energy that originally came from the sun. When we burn coal in a power station, gasoline in a vehicle, or natural gas in a furnace, we are releasing energy that was captured long ago. The fire that burns today may be releasing sunlight that was stored millions of years in the past. In this sense, fossil fuels are ancient sunlight. But for most of human history, we relied on energy stored in wood, coal, oil, and natural gas. Today, we are increasingly learning to capture sunlight directly through solar panels, converting sunlight into electricity without waiting millions of years for nature to store it underground. In a sense, we are becoming direct users of our sun's energy. Sunlight does more than support individual plants and animals. It also helped build civilization. Agriculture depends upon crops, and crops depend upon sunlight. When people learned to grow food reliably, they could produce more than they immediately needed. Remember, we discussed this in our first episode of Civilization. These food surpluses allowed populations to grow. Villages became towns, towns became cities, civilizations emerged. Writing, trade, government, science, and technology all developed within societies supported by agriculture. And agriculture itself depended upon sunlight captured by plants. The story of civilization is complex, but one of its foundations is surprisingly simple: sunlight growing in a field. Now, when we look at sunlight, it appears different. What seems like an ordinary beam of light is actually part of a much larger story. It began deep inside the sun. It crossed 150 million kilometers of space. It was captured by plants. It fed animals. It nourished humans. It powered civilizations. And sometimes it was stored for millions of years before being released again as fire. A beam of sunlight is not merely light. It is a connection between a distant star, our sun, and life on Earth. For billions of years, sunlight has streamed across space and reached our planet. Long before humans appeared, sunlight was warming its oceans, feeding ancient organisms, and shaping the history of life. Even today, it continues its journey every morning. We rarely stop to think about it because it seems ordinary. But sunlight may be the most important energy source Earth has ever received. Every forest, every harvest, every animal, every breath, and every civilization is connected to it. The story of life on Earth is in many ways the story of captured sunlight. But one fascinating question still remains: how does sunlight become food? How does a beam of light become a grain of wheat, a fruit on a tree, or a loaf of bread? That is the story we'll explore in our next episode. Hope you like this episode. Please do provide your feedback in the comment section below and subscribe to the channel if not already. And in the end, as always, thanks for watching. Stay curious and Allah Hafiz.